Sometimes you have to roll back the clock to move forward. This is the brand new Fender American Vintage 2 range. Hello, I am Vinny from Guitar, and today, as I've already mentioned, we are talking about the brand new American Vintage 2 range from Fender. And this is probably one of the most exciting launches of this year. This is the one that a lot of people have kind of been theorizing that pretty soon Fender are probably going to make a new range of American vintage guitars. About 2 years or so ago, they released American Professional 2, which is kind of like your standard guitar range. They also released the American Ultra and Ultra Luxe range, which is like your contemporary, super modern spec'd up range. So it only made sense for them to then revisit a more vintage spec range, and they have not disappointed. The American Vintage 2 is amazing, to kind of put it in one word, and obviously we're going to go more in depth than that, but really truly these are amazing, and we've had a little bit of a chance here at Guitar to get to know them a little bit before they launch, and honestly every single one of us has been blown away by one of these guitars in this range, and there's a lot of them to choose from. But before we start talking about models and we get ahead of ourselves, let's talk a little bit more in depth about what this is all about. So, the American Vintage 2 range is Fender's brand new premium American range based on year-specific vintage designs from Fender's golden era. To make that make sense, we maybe need to just look back a little bit. So, American Vintage was around for a little while. I believe they discontinued it somewhere in the mid-2010s. Fender then released the American Original range, which up until now has been that American sort of like classic model range. The thing about the American Original range was that the guitars weren't really based on specific years specs. They kind of took a little bit of what made a 50s Strat or like a 60s Tele, etc., and kind of put it in together to make, you know, an average of what that guitar should be, which was amazing, by the way. Lots of people loved the American Original range, including ourselves. They were really great guitars. One thing I feel like a lot of people call out for when they're looking for a more vintage spec guitar though, is that a lot of people like to have something which is more focused and is more like what it's supposed to be. So right now in my hand, I've got a 66 Jazzmaster. This is based on the specs of a 66 Jazzmaster, not any other Jazzmaster from the 60s, which for a lot of purists is really important. I can definitely get on board with that. I feel like Fender's guitars from those eras are so iconic in all of their own little different ways. It just gives a lot more room for Fender to recreate something special. So obviously in the name, this is the American Vintage 2 series. There has already been an American Vintage series, moved on to the American Original series. Now I'm pretty sure as far as American sort of like vintage spec Fenders go, this is the biggest range that they've ever done. As you can see behind me, there are tons and tons of guitars. I don't know, they're all behind there. And there are more. I haven't even got the basses behind me. So there's a whole load of basses too. There are tons of colors that aren't behind me. There's just loads and loads of guitars to choose from, which is amazing. And of all of those guitars, you can get 50s models, you can get 60s models, and you can also get 70s models. So Fender have made sure to feature all of the most iconic models from their extremely important history. And now, through the power of editing, I'm going to list all of the guitars and basses available in the American Vintage range without looking at my notes once. So to start off with, you've got the 1951 Telecaster, a 1954 Precision Bass, 1957 Stratocaster, a 1960 Precision Bass, a 1961 Stratocaster, a 1963 Telecaster, a 1966 Jazzmaster, a 1966 Jazz Bass, a 1972 Telecaster Finline, a 1973 Stratocaster, a 1975 Telecaster Deluxe, and finally a 1977 Telecaster Custom. Wasn't that good? Also, if you are left-handed, the 51 Tele, the 57 Strat, the 61 Strat, and the 66 Jazz Bass are all available in left-handed models on launch. So if you are at all aware of Fender's history, then you will know that in that time frame of 26 years, they did a lot with their guitars. They changed quite a lot of specs, different fingerboard woods, different pickup voicings, lots and lots of different things, which basically dictated what guitars were going to sound like for the next 70 years, basically. So there are some defining characteristics between the different decades, and these are a general rule of thumb that you can kind of use to differentiate which guitars might be for you in this range. So the 50s guitars are always going to have single ply pickguards, and they'll all have maple fingerboards on them. The 1960s models will then have multi-ply pickguards. They'll also have rosewood fingerboards, and you'll generally find that the more sort of brighter color finishes are on the 60s models. And then the 70s guitars, a lot of them have got humbuckers on them, which was kind of the first time Fender really did that as standard on their guitars. And a lot of them also come in natural wood finishes, which was very popular in the 70s. And all of this, of course, really feeds into what the American Vintage 2 range is all about. And really what makes it so impressive, because Fender have really not gone into this with a one-size-fits-all approach. Each model has its own focus, and pretty much every single one of these guitars has their own individual spec, which is a lot harder to do when you're talking about making guitars on, I don't want to say mass production sense, because these aren't like mass produced guitars, but very much so on sort of like a major range. It's quite impressive that a lot of these have got different neck profiles and fingerboard woods, but not just fingerboard woods, but how the fingerboard woods are actually put on the guitar. Different hardware designs, even different finish materials, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a second. It's really not easy to do that like Fender are doing with these. When you think about most guitar ranges when they come out historically, what will happen is they'll kind of figure out, you know, a general sense of how a guitar is going to feel if it's in that range, and they'll pretty much use the same kind of specs with every model. That's kind of oversimplifying things. But what I'm trying to say is, for all of these guitars to really be as different as they are from each other is quite a feat from Fender, and really is something to bear in mind when you're thinking about these guitars. All in all, the American Vintage 2 range is incredibly exciting. So let's talk about models. Now, as I've already mentioned, there are a lot of guitars in this range on launch. And if I was to talk about each one of those guitars in depth, one, this video would be about an hour long, and two, you probably don't want to watch through all of that. So I am going to go briefly over kind of just some of the most important specs of each model. But if you are interested in one of these specific models, we will soon be releasing separate videos for all of these where we can talk a little bit more in depth about each separate model, and you can hear more and more sounds of each of those models. So let's start with the similarities first, because there really aren't a lot. So the fingerboard radius on all of these is 7.25 inches. You've got vintage tall frets, and all of the guitars come with Fender's Pure Vintage pickups. All of the 50s and 60s models have a nitro lacquer finish, which again is pretty hard to do in this day and age. Not only is nitro really hard to work with, but it's also really hard to get around the sort of legalities of spraying with nitro nowadays. It's a really arduous process, and for Fender still to be using nitro on these vintage spec guitars, it's a real testament to their effort to make sure that these guitars are as close to their original counterparts as possible. The 70s models do come in gloss urethane. Again, those 70s models, they started using gloss urethane for those, so Fender have made sure to use the right material. These guitars are really close to what they're based on. As I'm going to be talking about each separate model for a minute or two, there are chapters just down below. If you want to maybe skip to one that you want to hear about, or you just generally want to skip past this part, please feel free to click on the different models or the bit after it. So now let's talk about the models in, I guess the easiest way to do this is going to be to do it in chronological order. I am going to also talk about the basses. I know, as I said, I don't have any of the basses behind me, but it's good to go through everything so we can all be on the same page. So let's start with the 51 Tele. The 51 Tele comes with an ash body. It also has a big, fat, chunky, U-shaped maple neck. Now, anyone who wants a 50s Tele wants a Tele with basically a baseball bat for a neck. It feels great. It's an amazing experience to play on a U-shaped neck like that. They feel great and really just representative of what these guitars were like. And I'm gonna stop saying that, because if I keep saying that, I'm gonna literally say it for every guitar. So whenever I tell you about a spec, just remember, it is representative of the model that it is based on. The 51 Tele comes with a free saddle, brass barrel, vintage bridge, and vintage style tuners. And it also only comes in butterscotch blonde, because they never made those in another color. And this is probably where someone's gonna put a comment and say that they did actually make it in another color. But as far as I'm aware, they only made it in butterscotch blonde. Next in the line, we have the 54 P bass. This is based on the first fretted intonated electric bass ever made, which Fender invented. Again, I'm sure someone's gonna say that something else was made and Fender didn't do it first. But for the sake of this video, let's say it is. The 54 P bass doesn't really look like the P bass that you might recognize now. You are seeing Fender use this original shape more and more in a few of their ranges, but I think this is maybe the first time that they've done it as an American sort of like core range model. Anyway, it's really cool. I always kind of call this the Tele bass, even though it's a P bass, but it's got that Tele headstock and it's kind of got like a different pick guard to what P basses normally use. It's really cool. It's great that they're making an American version of this. So the 54 P bass has an ash body and it is contoured like a Strat. It also has a U-shaped maple neck, just like that 51 Tele. So that is also nice and chunky. This P bass has a 2-barrel saddle vintage style bridge with vintage style tuners. And this one also comes in 2 colors. So you can either get it in 2-tone sunburst, which is the 50s sunburst, and you can also get it in vintage blonde. And now let's move over to 1957 to talk about the first Strat of the American Vintage 2 line. So the 57 Strat comes with an alder body unless you get the vintage blonde finished one, which does come with an ash body. The reason for that is that the ash has got a bit of a nicer grain, and seeing as the vintage blonde is quite translucent and you can see the wood through it, they wanted to make sure that it's got the grain. Again, this is the same way that they made them in the 50s too. Now, as I mentioned in this video, Fender have made sure to really focus on what makes these particular models so special, and there is no better model to see that than the 57 Strat. The 57 Strat has got a V-shaped neck, and it is the only model in the entire line, as far as I'm aware, with a V-shaped neck. The V-shaped neck just basically sits a little bit more sort of like, I guess, rigid in your hand. It's an amazing feeling. It really wraps around your hand, and similar to the 51 Tele, most of the time when people are looking for a 50s spec Strat, they want that V shape, and Fender have delivered. It just really feels good in your hand, and it makes total sense. We've also got vintage correct hardware, and the 57 Strat comes in 3 colors. So as I've already mentioned, you can get it in vintage blonde with the ash body, and then the older body, you can either get two-tone sunburst, which again is the 50 sunburst, and you can also get it in seafoam green, which is my favorite Fender color. We are now talking about the 1960 P-Bass. So if you are familiar with P-Basses, this is gonna look a little bit more like what you recognize. This is when Fender really started to kind of establish what the P-Bass should be. Personally, I'm a real lover of a 60s P-Bass, and there's no better year for it than the 1960 P-Bass. The 1960 P-Bass has an older body. It's also the first C-shaped neck that I've spoken about. It comes with a vintage style 4-threaded barrel bridge. So bad at F's and THs, that was a really hard one to say. And it also comes in 3 colors: black, 3-tone sunburst, and Daphne blue. The 61 Strat is the 60s era Strat of the American Vintage 2 line, and I'm a bit of a sucker for 60s Fenders. I don't know what it is about them. I just love the way that they look and sound, and if I was gonna be able to go back in time and rob one guitar from history, it would probably be a 60s Fender of some kind. But enough about me. The 61 Strat has got an alder body, a C-shaped maple neck with a slab rosewood fingerboard. Now remember that word, slab, because that is how they put the rosewood boards on in that time. However, later on, they did it differently, and surprise, surprise, Fender are doing a different building technique for one of the other guitars. And this model comes in Olympic white, Fiesta red, and 3-tone sunburst. And can I just say, I've only spoken about 5 guitars so far, and I feel like I have said so many different specs for each of them. And these are all within the same range. It's crazy. Next up, we have the 63 Tele. And I say 63 Tele with that loving tone in my voice because for me, this is the one. If I could have any of the guitars in this range, it would probably be this one, but also I'm thinking about some of the others and I'm not sure, but I do really love a 60s Tele. So the 63 Tele comes with an alder body unless you are going for the red finish, in which case it comes with a mahogany body, which is quite unusual. It comes with a C-shaped maple neck and, surprise, surprise, a rosewood fingerboard. But this rosewood fingerboard is laminated onto the guitar. So it is, again, a different process to the Strat I was just talking about. Pretty amazing from Fender that they've decided to do both of these different techniques within one range. I've got to stop saying that, but I really just can't get over how much attention has been put into these guitars. The 63 Tele has also got clay dots for the inlays, true to the original. A 3-saddle steel barrel vintage bridge with vintage style tuners. And the 63 Telly comes in 3-color sunburst, surf green, and as I've already mentioned, you can get a mahogany body with the crimson red transparent finish. So now let's talk about the 66 Jazzmaster, which is the guitar I have had in my hand throughout this video. This has got an alder body. It's also got a mid-60s C-shaped bound maple neck with a laminated rosewood fingerboard on top. And you've also got block inlays. So this binding on the neck and the block inlays, you can only get that on this guitar in this range. I'm not going to say it again, but that's pretty cool. We've got a vintage style Jazzmaster trem with vintage style tuners, and you can get this Jazzmaster in 3-color sunburst, Lake Placid blue, which I have in my hand, and you can also get it in Dakota red. And it's also very much worth noting that the Lake Placid blue and Dakota red finishes come with a painted headstock, which is amazing. I love painted headstocks on Fenders, and I'm really glad a few have got into the American Vintage 2 range. Moving on to the 70s, we're going to start off with the 72 Telly Finline. So the Finline Telly is of course the semi-hollow Telly that Fender do. This comes with an ash body, and this is the first guitar with humbuckers, and Fender have recreated their wide range humbuckers from the 70s today, which they haven't really done properly until now. This is the first time that they've used the same materials, and now there is an acronym which I believe are 3 different metal elements. And I don't know if you're supposed to spell it out, C-U-N-I-F-E, or if you're supposed to say it. And I'm kind of debating whether I should make an idiot of myself on camera and say it as a word, and I'm gonna do it. And I think it will probably be pronounced Kunife, but probably not. The 72 Telly Finline has a medium C-shaped neck. It's also got a Strat hardtail bridge, as well as 70s F-stamped tuners. You can get the Finline in Lake Placid blue, 3-color sunburst, and also that classic 70s aged natural finish. It's got a nice little yellowy tone to it. It looks amazing. Oh, there's a lot of guitars here. We've still got 3 more, and I'm feeling it. I'm really feeling it, guys. So the next guitar in the range is the 73 Strat. So we have got 3 different Strats in this range, and every single decade is represented. So it comes with an ash body and a medium C maple neck. One important thing to note about the 73 Strat and the next guitar I'm going to talk about is that Fender have stayed true to the design of the 70s guitars, and they've put the big fat 70s Fender headstock on it, as well as the much more bold Fender logo, which I believe they did because they wanted people to see the Fender logo better on the television, but it's just kind of part and parcel with those 70s guitars, and again, it's great. It's true to what it's meant to be. The 73 Strat also comes with different fingerboard woods, so if you go for either the Lake Placid blue or the mocha, you'll get a maple fingerboard. But if you're feeling like you want a rosewood fingerboard on this model, then you can get the aged natural finish. And yeah, it comes with a rosewood fingerboard, which is great that you have a little bit of range there. The 75 Telly Deluxe comes with an alder body, the pure vintage wide range humbucking pickups, a medium C-shaped 1-piece maple neck, a Strat hardtail bridge with block saddles, and the Telly Deluxe also comes with the more modern 2-point tuning pegs. And the Telly Deluxe comes in 3 colors, black, mocha, and 3-color sunburst. And I'm really second guessing myself when I'm pronouncing mocha, mocha, mocha. And now we come to the last guitar in the range. It has been a journey. This is the 1977 Telecaster Custom. So the big difference between the Tele Custom and the Tele Deluxe is that the Deluxe has got 2 humbuckers and the Custom has got the classic Tele style bridge pickup and then one of the wide range humbuckers in the neck. So the Tele Custom also comes with the Alder body. You can also get these with a maple neck and fingerboard or a laminated rosewood board, depending on what you go for. It's got a 6-saddle steel barrel vintage Tele style bridge, as well as 70s F-stamp tuners. And you can get the Tele Custom in black, wine, or Olympic white. So to summarize on the American Vintage 2 range, it has been a pretty long time since Fender have released a new vintage style range. The last range that they released, as I mentioned, is the American Original range, and Fender have really come a long way in the way that they build their guitars in their factories since that was released. So it's really great to see that they're putting a lot of those new abilities into a new vintage range. I've spoken a lot in this video about how great it is that Fender have made sure to make such year-specific recreations of some of these models, but maybe I haven't spoken about why that's so good. These guitars really shaped Fender as a brand. They really led them in the direction that they have ended up over these last 70 odd years. And Fender is one of my favorite guitar brands, and they have done so much, not just for the guitar world, but just for modern contemporary music as a whole. So much of what Leo Fender invented in that golden era really just completely dictated what guitars were going to be for the next 20, 30, 70 years. And it's so important that we have some kind of representation of those guitars on the market. And short of going out and spending, let's face it, a lot of money on a custom shop version of those models, being able to buy a premium American-made vintage version of Fender's most iconic models is a really great thing to have. And if you have been into a guitar shop in the last 2 or 3 years, you may have noticed there haven't been a lot of American originals around. It's really great that we're getting a refresh of these vintage models. And the American Vintage 2 range, as I've already said, it really just has blown all of us away at Guitar Guitar. It is an incredible range, and Fender have once again really outdone themselves with these. What's really great about the way that these different models have been chosen in terms of the year that they are, is that you really do have a huge range. If you like a Strat, but you're not sure if you like a maple fingerboard or a rosewood fingerboard, or maybe you like a chunkier neck or whatever, there's a huge ton of choice. So you can basically get something with more of that vintage vibe if that's what you're into. And there is genuinely a model for everyone just within the American Vintage range. I mean, Fender's range is huge. Just at the American level, as I've mentioned, you do have the American Professional 2s, which are the more standard range, as well as the Ultra and Ultra Luxes, again, which are super modern. But then just within the Vintage 2s, there is just so much scope in terms of what you can go for. And really all I can say is you just need to come into a Guitar Guitar and try one of these guitars, because I love Fender and I really love what they have done with these. And without making any controversial takes, because I'm not going to say on the internet that these are just as good as the originals, because there will literally be a mob outside my door. What I will say is, as far as vintage spec guitars go, these are probably going to be some of the best on our wall if you come into a Guitar Guitar. They're great, they're amazing, absolutely love them. And they all come with a hard case. Probably worth mentioning that at the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know if you are as excited about these as us. Is there a certain model that has already piqued your interest? Is there maybe a model that they haven't made, or a colorway that they haven't done which you would have liked to have seen? Do let us know. If you like the video, please like and subscribe. It really goes a long way. And of course, the Fender American Vintage 2 Series is now available to purchase at a Guitar near you, or if you can't get to a store, you can also buy them at guitarguitar.co.uk. We'll see you very soon. Until then, bye.